Alright, so today I'm joined with Noire, who is not only the #1 player in the SVO West for 2020, but also for 2019. How are you doing today, Noire?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Lewis. Yeah, it's been a really crazy year. I'm just really glad that I'm able to go back to the World Grand Prix because I was definitely feeling pretty unsatisfied with last year how it ended, and I'm just glad that I get another chance, basically.
Yeah, so real quick, can you give us a quick overview of how that last year went? You were the #1 playing. What was your experience like when you went to Worlds?
Yeah, so like it was all like pretty smooth sailing for the most part. In Pam, even though it was pretty close on points in the end, it was still like pretty good. And Worlds, well, the meta Verdant Conflict was, I think, very divisive to say the least.
Okay.
Um, and I mean, I think I did practice a lot. I practiced more than I ever did for any sort of Shadowverse event. Obviously, my first World Grand Prix, but in the end, like it was really weird because I felt like I was playing well, in scrims leading up to the event, and I did have like a good amount of knowledge about the decks and the meta in general, but I made like a really silly mistake actually in round 2 against Tabata. I didn't play around Genesis Dragon Lethal for like no reason
Yeah.
basically, and like looking back, like I mean, immediately after I was like, there's no reason for me to make the play that I made. It just made no sense, and then that was like honestly the only real significant misplay that I can remember because after that I lost a match because of that. And then I lost one take two, and that was on stream. Like there's nothing I could have done about
Yeah,
that
it
one.
happens.
Yeah, and then another rotation round after that, we were just going back and forth. Verdant Conflict, it kind of just happens, right? Like if you have two good players, they're just gonna take games off each other. And then in the end, I was up 2-1, and then I didn't draw any Storm on Amatas for 2 games in a row, and I lost. So, right, it feels pretty bad, but at the same time, like it still comes back to not playing around Genesis Dragon that one time. Although if I did win that game, it would have just gone to a Game 5 Dragon Mirror, Natura Dragon Mirror, in Verdant Conflict with Eldain and everything.
Yeah.
So, that obviously is just a pure 50-50. Like, at that level, no one's going to be misplaying that matchup. So, it's just, who draws more ramp, who draws Valdane first, more trees, blah, blah, blah.
Okay, so basically, I feel like as a competitive player, when you have those losses that cost you a lot, they'll stay with you. You'll remember that moment, right?
Yeah.
Like, think of all the tournaments that you've won. Like, those games will be forgotten, right? But that one defeat will haunt you, right? But what I'm getting is that you're saying that at the end of all that, that was still in your control. That, hey, you made that mistake. So if I'm not mistaken, you got 9th place at World, right? One away from getting.
I think so. It was like 9th or 10th, something like that.
Okay, so you went to Worlds, you had a good showing, and you fell a little short. Do you remember in that moment what your feelings were like, knowing that you had another year to play, but you were not guaranteed to make it to Worlds, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what was like, how did you approach the new year, I suppose?
Okay. Yeah, so like I knew that I could do really well within Ham, or well, at that point I already knew it was going to be West with Europe combined. So
Yeah.
I mean, actually at that time, I guess some of us were speculating that something like that, like a region merge, would actually happen because we knew like Euro SVO was getting not as many player count, but it was a little bit concerning for sure because there's a lot of good European players for sure. There's like Himari, there's Hishiro, Praetorian, everybody there. So having like all of those players added into the SVO that I play was a little bit concerning for sure. But I was still pretty confident that I would be able to do well within SVO. And for me, it was more a matter of not like I want to get to Contenders Cup. It's like I have to go to Worlds again, and this time I'm gonna do better. So that was pretty much like my mindset from the very beginning. And there were definitely like ups and downs along that path. There were definitely, moments during the 2020 season where I felt like, an absolute circus jester and I had no idea what I was doing. Like, February, March, I went 4-3 back to back. I was like, and I wasn't even playing that bad. It was just, it literally came down to what my lineup was. And it was just like, it was a really weird feeling because I always felt before, at least in 2019, that if you have like, multiple match losses in Swiss, like the only realistic way that can happen is if, you're misplaying, realistically, right?
Yeah.
Especially if it happens multiple times. But when I'm in that situation now, in Ultimate Coliseum, I'm just looking at, my Dragon deck, my Roach deck. I drew 3 Maze on turn 1, or I'm playing a Noire beatdown with Dragon. I'm just like, where did it all go wrong? And I was just so lost, and I was like, just like, quite frankly, I was just like baby raging in Disaster Team General. I'm like, dude, what is going on? What am I doing? What am I doing wrong? I'm not even playing that badly. Sure, there were some plays I could play better, but most of my losses are just because my decks are just straight up they're trolling me.
Hey, that's Shadowverse, man,
That
right?
is Shadowverse, man. And then I ended up me and V2 both we came to this this epiphany. We gotta bring consistent mid-range or mid-range adjacent decks that are as board-based as possible, because historically these are the decks that are not only most consistent but the most skill-based in Shadowverse. And I mean, I think board-based decks are pretty skill-based, in like other card games as well. But especially for Shadowverse, uh, decks like that where you're fighting for board, where you're planning out board swings and fighting around those sorts of board-based win conditions. Those are the decks that even if you have like a suboptimal hand, you can find ways to win. And if you have a good hand, I feel like you can almost certainly, like definitely win.
Yeah.
So decks like that I wanted to focus on for the rest of the year, and that is kind of what I did. I just went with consistent, strong decks. Nothing crazy. I certainly like did not want to touch any weird combo deck that was like not super consistent. Like I never wanted to play Roach again. There was no way I was gonna touch Item Shop. Decks like that I stood far away from. And
I
it
feel
was like
like,
pretty much the rest of the year, and I think it worked out.
yeah, as the number one player, you have to be consistent to get there, right?
Yeah.
And I think since you were the number one player for PAM last year, number one player for West this year, very quickly, do you think that the region merge makes the regular SBO harder? Is it more difficult now?
Hard to say, especially because somehow. I mean, well, to be fair, like the point difference between me and Azure Cloud at the very end is sort of like it's sort of a debate, because the real match that mattered in terms of being at the top was just me versus Azure Cloud. If he won, then
Yeah.
he easily could have been like several points ahead of me. So it was very close in the end this year, and it was very close in the end last year as well. So I mean, in the end, I'm not really sure if it was any harder.
Okay,
I
that's
think it
fair.
was about the same.
So I feel like a lot of players, when they watch the SBO, maybe the more casual players, they just see like, oh, here's these guys, they're playing the meta decks. Like you just, you go to Temple Storm Meta Snapshot, copy the tier 1 decks into a lineup. But for you take this very seriously. What is your practice like? What is the stuff that happens behind the scene that people don't see? Are you grinding the ladder? You're watching those streams? Are you scrimming? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, I'm sure there's like a bunch of different sort of ideas about what it might look like behind the scenes, and I think it's one of those things where sometimes you don't want to meet your heroes. But I don't want to make it sound that bad. Okay, it's not this like crazy gaming house training regimen. Wake up at this time. It's none of that, right? Obviously,
Yeah.
but. I think something that I hear a lot from people is that ladder is not the best place to learn, because the players are not the best, and you can't necessarily get the best read on whether your decks are good or not. And definitely, I agree with that to an extent. But I think with the right mindset, ladder is actually still very useful. And I do, play like a decent amount of ladder. I don't like super grind it or anything. I've never even gone past like GM2 or anything like that. So I'm not playing like a huge amount, but it is still useful. I do still like value, the things that I can learn from playing ladder, but I think you do need to have like an adjusted mindset. You have to like take into account like, okay, if my opponent played a bit better, then this deck would have lost in this situation. Things like that. But I think you do obviously need like good players to scrim with as well. Even if it's not like all the time, you do need at least some scrims. And I'll scrim like especially throughout the league leading up to SVO, and especially like the day or the night right before deck submission. We're all like everybody on the team is just like going crazy. Basically, we're staying up until like 3 a.m. Going mad over one card differences in our deck and stuff like that.
Yeah, so I remember at Contenders Cup last year, after the first day where there weren't any games yet, we had that situation where the players, went to a hotel room and some of them were like practicing, some of them were like playing Smash or something like that.
Yeah.
Can you tell a short version of this to the audience?
Oh, yeah. So it was funny because for the EU side of Contenders Cup, all the players who went to me and V2's room 632 to party, all of them moved past round 1, but all the people who scrimmed instead actually lost.
So do you think sometimes it's like you've practiced and then there's only so much, if you're grinding extra hours, it might not necessarily even help you, right?
Yeah, there are definitely there's a case for diminishing returns for sure. And it's hard to say whether you are getting diminished returns or not, because it really depends on how much did you know beforehand, how much are you actually learning now. And at the end of the day, if you're feeling good, if you're feeling confident going into a tournament, that matters a lot as well.
So how are you feeling, I guess, this year going into Worlds?
I feel good, just like generally good. Although it is a little bit uneasy because it's not even going to be in Storm over Reveal. It's not even going to be in that expansion because it's been delayed to 2021. We don't even know the name of the expansion that's going to be
does that concern you? Like, because, sometimes if you win, you're hot, you're number one, you'd rather just go and, play it. But now it's like you qualified and you have to just sit there and wait, right?
I am pretty confident in sort of my ability to learn new decks and new metas really quickly. I think that is one of my strengths as a player, that I can spend just like 1 or 2 days with the deck and then actually get pretty good with all its nuances. Not like, I haven't mastered the deck, but I've gotten to like a pretty good point already by then. And then I can already start, having like meaningful discussions about the deck and its matchups and stuff like that. So I think I could definitely pick up on whatever new meta it is by that time. It's just there's no indication of whether that meta is going to be a lot of like board-based decks. Is it going to be really high power level, really low power level? Is it going to be a lot of combo? There's just no way to guess, right?
Yeah. So you've been playing Shadowverse for a long time now, right? You've interacted with a lot of the community themes, like the Sasha, things like that, but you're also part of Team Tempo Storm. How has that experience helped you? How has that been, I guess, being a part of Tempo Storm, such a big organization?
I mean, yeah, it's definitely, really cool. It's super hype. I was definitely like doing a lot of things and working pretty hard, trying to, boost certain connections to, get the sponsorship and all of that. So it was pretty much my goal for a large part of 2019, or at least the first half, to get picked up by a good org. And so that finally happened, and that was super great. And I've been able to get a lot of good opportunities with like buddy system, including casting buddy system. I got to meet a lot of different people from Tempo Storm, at the studio in LA, and I got to do all sorts of different things. And it's been just a really good experience. I'm really glad that I've been able to meet and interact with so many people as a result of this connection. And, it's just been, nothing but good things, I want to say.
Yeah, I want to say that, when people watch the SBO, you only see, the casters, the players, but there's a lot of people that work behind the scenes that make a lot of this stuff happen. And since we're in the position where we can meet them, it's really cool that we can make those connections.
Right.
So,
sure.
What about Noire? Not the Shadowverse player, but Noire, the dude. What is your life like? Are you a student? Do you have a job? Is Shadowverse like your full time thing, or what is the? How does your regular life look like? I guess.
So like I graduated and then I worked for a while for like just a bit over a year. And then after that, I sort of like started putting more time into Shadowverse, and then it sort of became sort of a full-time thing. It wasn't originally meant to be a full-time thing, I guess, even in like the beginning of 2019.
Yeah.
I'm doing like Shadowverse as like my main gig, and I'm doing like small other things on the side. But for the most part, I am chilling and playing Shadowverse.
I think oftentimes people ask me, like, as one of the top content creators, like, can one make a living playing Shadowverse? Like, can the top player in NA, like, you're able to get by with just your Shadowverse winning sponsorships,
Yes.
all this stuff? That's pretty cool, though, right? Because oftentimes people see Shadowverse as like the small game in the West, but it's nice that we can make something of ourselves in Shadowverse.
Yeah, for sure.
So, okay, if you go to a World Grand Prix and you win $1 million, what are you doing with it, man?
Well, first I gotta treat my boys to some nachos,
Nachos.
It's been like
Okay.
this running joke where, like, if I win $1 million, first thing I gotta do, 3 a.m. at Denny's, order those gigantic plates of nachos for the boys.
Do you have any like real plans, or it would just be like, for you, because you're close, is it like a dream or something that's like achievable, and you're like, or is that not what you're even focused on? You're just more worried about the game,
I'm definitely more worried about the game, but I do see it as something achievable. It's a little like weird to talk about it in that sense because it's obviously the thing that everybody wants, and I think like most of the players who qualify for Worlds do genuinely believe that they have a chance at winning it all. I think like pretty much all the players are really good. I mean, obviously, like some still are going to be better than others, but it's really stacked every year.
Yeah.
And I mean, I also think that this year I have a shot of taking it all. It just comes down to my preparation, how well I'm playing, on the days of the actual tournament. And I mean, Japan, obviously, Shadowverse is much bigger there. They have, the Pro League and all of that, a more developed scene, I guess. And they have, a higher, quantity of top level players. But I think at that very top level, the very best players in the West can definitely compete with the very best players from anywhere else.
I think we've shown that because the West has got in second place multiple times.
Yeah.
And hey, we had Asher Cloud.
Jay-Z got third, and Akka got second that year.
Yeah.
Next year, Pod got second. The year after that, a little bit of a disaster.
I mean, Asher Cloud top 8.
At least did get top 8, yeah. And
That's
he
still
brought,
pretty good.
Jupi to game 5, which was good. But I really want to get at least top 4. I want to getting to the finals would be just really amazing. That's absolutely what I'm aiming for this year, and like I just want to prove that like I am really good at Shadowverse, that I can be one of the best players in the world, and that the players from the West, from NA, can be up there competing with the very best as well. I want to prove that like I'm good, that NA is good, all of that.
From my perspective, watching you compete in SVO for 2 years now, I think there's no doubt that you are the best player we have in the West. And I want to know that once you go there in the World Grand Prix, we're all going to be rooting for you, and we know you could do it. Real quick before we wrap this up, give me a little bit more info about, you as a human. What do you like? What are you into? Favorite Shadowverse card? Favorite game? Things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like an ironic weeb, I guess. I'm obviously into, the whole aesthetic, but I actually barely watch any anime or read any manga these days. I mean, if anything, I just watch anime clips because they're more condensed. I get some value out of it in a short amount of time.
Yeah.
I do play other games, of course. I love a lot of different types of single player games. I love RPGs, both Western or JRPGs. like Xenoblade, like Witcher, everything. I really enjoy those sorts of games. I love tactical games like XCOM. Those are like some of my favorites as well. And of course, I play Smash.
Yep.
Besides that, I love having the serious discussions, about like current real life topics. I often have like 3 hour long Skype calls with some of my friends who live in like the States or anywhere else, and just talking about like different issues from different perspectives. Me living in Canada versus them living in the States or whatever, and how the next few years are gonna pan out and things like that. I love having those sorts of insightful discussions with people. That's like a big sort of like hobby of mine that I only really get to do every once in a while. But yeah,
Have you ever considered streaming on Twitch?
I have like a couple times before. It was never really gonna be like a regular thing.
Yeah.
Because for me, like I think it's pretty easy for me to have like high energy and be sort of animated when I'm in the presence of another person, or if I'm at least getting direct responses from another person. But when it's just me, sitting here in my living room talking to like Twitch chat or something, like, and I'm not getting actual auditory feedback from another human being, it just isn't the same, right? And like obviously a lot of people are able to stay energized, which I think is really impressive. For me, it's just really difficult to keep a high level of energy despite not getting direct human feedback, and that's a bit of a struggle for me. And at the same time, if we're talking about practicing, streaming versus just laddering by myself versus scrimming with my team, those are all like very different things. And streaming is like the worst out of the three in terms of quality practice. So yeah, there's that as well.
All right, real quick, last question before we end. Just give me a yes or no. Metroid Prime 4, does it come out 2021 or no?
No.
No? All right, well, thank you so much for, doing this with me, Noire. I want people to know that at Contenders last year, it was a great event. We got to meet everybody. But for me, my most, the memory, what I remember the most, what I enjoyed the most was just us in the room playing Smash. I feel like that was a great time. So, shout out to Noire. Any shout outs you want to give or anything like that?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely shout outs to, Disaster, Temple Storm. Also, like, my friends on, other teams, Team Revelation, MS, all of those guys who have supported me a lot and, have given me a lot of kind words throughout, this year and last year. Especially, Saturday, after losing the Cut in round 3, a lot of people came into my DMs and started supporting me. That was super helpful. Thank you a lot, guys. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here, Noire. We'll see you in the World Grand Prix.
Yep. Thank you.